The next show that we're going to be talking about is a really long name, and I don't know why I didn't put the English name.
We'll just put it on screen and let's see what it is.
Academic one.
Oh yeah, okay.
What's the name of it?
Something about a bastard magician or whatever. Okay, I watched this one, so I'll just take it up from that one. Okay, what I thought based upon the description kind of ended up being true. Okay. So basic storyline ends up being where this is a world abundant with magic. It is taught, and apparently in other nations there's different, prestige for going on with it. The nation that you're focused on, where you're at, is a nation that has the most prestigious school of magic. It is not necessarily a public thing. And kind of like the way in the world of Harry Potter and whatnot, you're usually not supposed to use magic outside of, especially for students outside school grounds. Try not to use it in real world situations and whatnot. And you follow these basically two girls who are students from here. They don't give you a lot of background for them. You kind of follow that's one thing that you end up finding as you go along. So they don't really explain a whole lot from the get-go. But where the main guy character falls in is he ends up becoming a substitute teacher. The teacher for which they were originally assigned to, mysteriously it does not show up, so he gets called in as a substitute. So his character from the get-go, and it's what you kind of saw or read from the description, he's pretty much like, I don't want to. No. No. Not to say he doesn't want to teach or anything. He's just like, I really don't want to do anything or deal with it or whatnot. And for the most part, in most of the classes, he ends up just writing self-study because he doesn't want to deal with it. And his character in the very beginning, he's very goofy. Very goofy. The first time he meets the girls, he was running late for the school and he runs into them and he ends up falling into a fountain, and some hilarity ends up ensuing with that, and mostly it's just facepalm moments where you're just going, come on, really, dude? And then later on, in I think either in that episode or the next one, she gets PO'd at the fact that he keeps calling self-study for class. So she tells him, challenges him to a duel, which is supposed to be unheard of to challenge instructors. Students and challenging instructors to duel, because you're like, well, they're instructors. They know more. They're more powerful. Why? But she ends up winning. And because they do it's supposed to be, the challenge was you could use one spell. They both knew it, same spell. And it was to see who could cast it fastest and better, because you have to have like incantation or whatever. Like there's no wands or anything, it's just incantations to summon, basic magic rules and whatnot. And he just didn't do it. He wouldn't do it. She did it the fastest and he just would not. And so he kept getting zapped and zapped and zapped and zapped and zapped, and eventually they're just like, okay, he loses. So basically like the first episode, or I can't remember that it was all the way into episode 2 or not, but basically like the first episode is kind of like It isn't until later on that things get interesting. And you end up finding a little bit more about him when he actually starts to take things a little bit more seriously. Because he gets one of the other girl that's with the main girl, the pink-haired one. I'm terrible with names. Everyone knows both names. So I'll probably almost never say names or whatnot. But anyways, she tells him how she's more interested in making magic more accessible and understandable to the general populace, which is why she studies the way she does. And it kind of, I guess, spoke to him, because then he started taking it a little more seriously. And you kind of get the feeling, because he talks about how he does not like magic, how he views it as a wrongness instead of a tool to be used for the good of people. It's something that could potentially, he's like, oh, it's not great. I don't know why everyone here is thinking it, but it's not. And it isn't until like later on after that the school gets attacked, and then you see a little bit even more into his character. And when you do, you're like, oh, crap, because he actually ends up being really good. And like I was thinking from the description, the reason why he actually has reasons why he's as lazy as he is and doesn't want to do things, because he kind of has a bit of a bloody past, which is why they call about bastard magician, is because usually those who are called that are because they have killed before. And you kind of see it in the beginning, because you see, and it's obvious that it was in the beginning of it, you see him as a kid reading stories about great magicians battling, great evils or whatever. And I guess his reasoning for what he did as far as learning magic was because he wanted to be that. And when he found out, when he learned the magic he did, and he was as good, because he really is, he's amazing at what he does, and he's as good as he is, he ended up being put in a lot of situations where he had to take out evil, bad magicians, bad magic and whatnot. And I think that took a toll on him, and eventually he just wanted to step away from that. So because it's one of the other teachers of the school that actually pulled him in and said, I want you to be the substitute here. And she kind of forced him into it, kind of. So but yeah, it's once you get past the initial little hump there with the character, I will say it gets a lot better. It gets a lot more interesting, and the aspects in which he understands and says about magic itself, it's one of those kind of like I was talking about before with that the interviews with Monster Girls, how it's stuff that you already knew, but because it was said in a different way, in a different light, it made it seem new and interesting. The way he treats and uses magic, I mean, it's same concept and things that you've seen before, but he does it in such a way that he brings a new light to it and makes you think about it in a different way. Because, he was even saying before, like, his students were talking about how magic, is like, oh, it's does stuff with the world. And he's like, no, it's based upon you. It's based upon how you perceive, and it augments in that regards as well. And it's like when he was discussing it, I'm like, wow, I had never thought of it that way. And then the way he uses things and the way he does things, I'm like, damn. Because one of his signature moves actually is he has a card, ironically the Fool card, and like a tarot kind of card. But when he activates it, it negates all magic around him. So at one point he was faced with a dark magician or whatever, and one of his students was there, and he's like, well, you can't use magic. And he's like, what? He's like, yeah, you can't use magic. And he pulled it out and explained it. And he's like, well, you can't use magic too. He's like, yeah, I know, it's one of the side effects. But then the funny thing is that the next thing you know, he ends up coming around and just beating the ever-loving crap out of him physically. So he's like, I don't need to use it though, because I know all this stuff. I'm like, there's where the smart thing comes in. You got someone who relies so totally on magic, and which is where his whole mindset was. He's like, it's the way he was telling his students, he's like, you're relying too much on magic. You're using it as a crutch.
Yeah.
You can't just rely on magic. It has to be something that helps you, but doesn't just do everything for you, which is why he did what he did. And so like the more he does and the more he does his spells, I'm like, okay, this is more of his personality coming through because of that, which is awesome. So it's the initial part is a little rough, but once you get past that, it becomes just great. I freaking love it.
Okay. I was wary about this show because I didn't like the guy from the trailer. So I don't know. I'd say give it a couple.
If you do it, give it your like 2 or 3 eps. If after that point you still don't like it, okay. But because he still every now and then does his little quirkiness and whatnot and silliness. But I think when you look at it in the light of the fact that he does it because he's trying to, I don't know. I look at it as like a defense mechanism almost. Because I think the way they perceived him, and he actually had a title. Like when the evil magicians that came realized who he was, he actually has a title, which means how serious he was. Yeah. And then you look at his quirkiness, and you're like, okay, that's more of like an emotional defense mechanism because of all the serious shit that he probably had to deal with.
Yeah.
So
okay. Yeah. For some reason, this kind of reminds me of Rurouni Kenshin. because from the little bit of that show that I know, because I haven't watched it, how you have this like super serious, powerful guy with all this bloodshed in his history, and now he's like, I don't want to do that, and he like, yeah. So, and
he's happy living. He's happy living a substitute teacher's life, just teaching other kids. So,
okay, sounds interesting. I'll add it to the list.
See if it makes it.
Mechs are way more complicated than cars. Like, they have arms and legs and billions of moving parts. So for her to be like a steering wheel, and you're like, why is she so absurdly strong? And then they reveal the reason, and you're like, that's cool. Oh no, everything's going crazy. Hey!